My sister found out. Her husband was cheating. I suggested revenge, but she said, "Finally, I thought this day would never come." When my sister Sophie discovered her husband's affair, I was ready to help her plot the ultimate revenge. But instead of anger, she shocked me with a smile and joy. That moment unraveled the truth behind her so-called perfect marriage. Sophie and Ethan had always been the golden couple. For as long as I could remember, they were the example everyone in our family pointed to when they talked about love that lasts. They had it all. At least it looked that way. A big, beautiful house with a wraparound porch, summer vacations in Europe, and matching holiday pajamas that looked like they came straight from a magazine. Whenever we were around them, Ethan would act like Sophie was the center of his universe. He was always touching her arm, getting her a drink, or laughing at her jokes. You could just feel the admiration between them. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't compare myself to Sophie. I did it all the time. I'd think about my own failed relationships, how nothing ever seemed to last, how I kept choosing the wrong people. Meanwhile, Sophie had the fairy tale. She had the dream life, or so I thought. That's why her phone call last Saturday completely floored me. I was cleaning up my apartment when my phone rang. I saw Sophie's name flash across the screen and answered right away. Her voice was steady, but there was something in the way she spoke that didn't feel right. "I need you to come over," she said. "What's wrong?" I asked, instantly feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Something was definitely off. There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice had a sharper edge. "I found out Ethan's cheating." "What?" I almost dropped the phone. "Are you serious? Did he tell you?" "No," she said, her tone flat but firm. "I saw a text pop up on his phone. It wasn't exactly subtle." "What did it say?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." That's what it said. I sat in stunned silence for a moment. My mouth was open, but no words came out. Then, like someone flipped a switch, anger rushed in. Hot, quick, and fierce. "I'll be there soon," I said. "Don't do anything without me." I didn't even stop to think. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and was out the door. I stormed into Sophie's house like a tornado, ready to go to war for her. I had ideas. Big, messy, dramatic ideas. I wanted Ethan to pay. "Okay," I said the moment I saw her. "Here's what we're gonna do. We expose him. Post those texts online. Or we could smash his car. Something big, something public. He deserves it." But Sophie didn't look how I expected her to. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. Her makeup was perfect. Her hair pulled back neatly. She sat on the couch like nothing had happened, her hands folded calmly in her lap. "No," she said softly. "We're not doing any of that." I stared at her. "What do you mean, no?" "Sophie, come on, he cheated on you. This isn't the time to be calm." She looked at me, and then she smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile you give when someone tells a joke. It was quiet and eerie. It sent a chill down my spine. "I'm not angry," she said. "I'm relieved." I blinked, sure I had heard her wrong. "Relieved? You're kidding, right?" "Not at all," she replied. Her voice was steady, like she'd rehearsed this conversation in her head 100 times. I shook my head, confused. "Sophie, what are you talking about? You wanted to divorce him all this time, or what?" She looked at me, her eyes calm, and patted the seat beside her. "No. Come here. I'll show you." I hesitated for a moment before walking over and sitting next to her. My heart was still pounding, but hers seemed steady. I couldn't understand how she could be so composed after finding out something so devastating. The Sophie I knew, the one we all thought had the perfect life, was unraveling right in front of me, but not in the way I expected. There was something else going on, something she hadn't told anyone. And in that moment, as I sat beside her on the couch, I realized the fairy tale we all believed in might not have been real after all. Sophie didn't say a word at first. She stood up slowly and walked over to her nightstand. I watched as she pulled open the drawer and reached inside. From it, she took out a small, worn diary. It looked old, like it had been opened and closed hundreds of times. Its corners were bent and the spine was cracked. As she brought it closer, I noticed something else. Pressed flowers, dried and delicate, were sticking out from between the pages. "What is this?" I asked, watching her closely. She handed it to me without answering the question directly. "Read it," she said softly. I sat back down, holding the diary carefully in my hands. I flipped through a few of the pages. The handwriting was hers, neat but a little shaky in places, like the words had been written in a rush of emotion. Each entry was short, just a few sentences, but together, they began to form a story, and not the one I had expected. I started to read aloud. "Ethan brought me flowers today. He said he got them because he loves me, but I know it's just because I've been upset." I paused and looked up at her. "This is from the first year you were married," I said, confused. "You were upset back then?" She nodded slowly. "Keep reading." I turned the page. Ethan smiled at me during dinner tonight. It felt fake, but at least he's trying in front of everyone. I felt something tighten in my chest. These weren't love notes. They weren't sweet little memories. They were signs, early signs of something broken. I closed the diary, gently, the weight of it heavy in my lap. "Sophie," I said, trying to understand. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" She let out a soft sigh and gave a small shrug. "What was there to say? He's cold. He doesn't love me, but he's always been good at pretending when people are around." And for a while, that was enough. I stared at her, my mind racing. But this, I gestured toward the diary. This doesn't sound like enough. This sounds awful. She smiled, and it was that same strange smile from earlier. Sad, quiet, almost like it didn't belong on her face. It was awful, she said. But I held on because I thought he'd change, or that maybe if I waited long enough, he'd feel guilty and start treating me better. My heart ached for her. All this time, I'd been watching her life like it was a movie. Beautiful, happy, perfect. But behind the curtain, behind the smiles and vacations and fancy dinners, she had been hurting, waiting, hoping for something that never came. I don't understand, I said. Why would you think guilt would fix anything? Ethan's a jerk, Sophie. A liar. Her eyes softened as she looked at me. Do you remember when Dad cheated on Mom? She asked quietly. I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, of course. She nodded, her gaze dropping back to the diary in her lap. He started bringing her flowers and buying her gifts after that. She hated it. I know she did, but I loved it. For the first time, I saw her being treated like she was special. Even if it was fake, it felt better than nothing. I sat back, stunned. I remembered that time. I remembered how awkward things got in our house, how Mom barely spoke to Dad, how quiet dinners had become. But I also remembered the gifts, the flowers that showed up out of nowhere, the new coffee machine, the earrings that Mom never wore. I just didn't realize Sophie had noticed too, or that it had meant something so different to her. You can't honestly think Ethan will do the same, I said, not able to hide the disbelief in my voice. I don't know, she admitted. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it's what I've been hoping for. I thought if he cheated, he'd feel guilty, and maybe I'd finally feel loved, even if it's just scraps. Sophie. My voice broke a little. I reached for her hand. You deserve more than scraps. She didn't answer. She just stared down at the diary in her lap like it held all the answers, like it was the only thing in the world that truly understood her. I felt helpless, completely helpless. How had my brilliant, beautiful sister, this woman who everyone admired, ended up here? Stuck in a marriage that looked perfect on the outside but was hollow and cold behind closed doors? For a moment, I truly believed things might change. I thought that maybe Ethan, now caught, would panic, that he'd try to fix it, make up for what he'd done, try to win her back. But that didn't happen. Instead, he grew colder. Ethan didn't say much after Sophie found out. In fact, he barely spoke to her at all. Days passed without a word, unless it was absolutely necessary. No apologies, no flowers, no excuses, no guilty gestures, nothing. We waited at first. We thought maybe he was just stunned or ashamed, or maybe trying to figure out what to say, but the silence dragged on. And the more time passed, the clearer it became. He didn't care. He doesn't even care, Sophie whispered one night as we sat on her couch, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. She had her knees tucked under her, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders like armor. Her voice was thin, cracked, like it was barely holding together. I thought he'd at least try to hide it, or make me feel like I mattered, but he just doesn't. I had no answer for her. Nothing comforting came to mind. She was right. 2 weeks later, Ethan made his move. No warning, no discussion. He came home in the evening, went straight upstairs, and started packing a suitcase. Sophie followed him, confused and panicked. "What are you doing?" she asked, standing in the doorway of their bedroom. "I'm leaving," he said flatly, not even looking at her. "For her?" Her voice trembled. "Yes, that was all," he said. Just that one word, no apology, no explanation. "I think it's time we stop pretending this is working," he added as he zipped up the suitcase. I was there when it happened. I had come over earlier to check in on her, and I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, watching as Ethan brushed past her without a glance. He walked down the stairs, out the front door, and didn't look back. Not even once. Sophie didn't chase after him. She just stood there in the middle of the living room, her arms hanging loosely at her sides, staring at the space where he had been, like if she waited long enough, he might come back. But he didn't. The first few weeks after he left were hard. Really hard. Sophie barely got out of bed. She didn't eat much, didn't shower, barely spoke. Her house started to feel like a ghost town. Silent, still, heavy. I visited every day. I brought food, cleaned up dishes she hadn't touched, opened curtains to let in light she didn't want. I sat with her through long stretches of silence, reminding her again and again that life wasn't over. Eventually, she began to shift just a little, enough for me to gently push her forward. "There's a flower shop downtown," I told her one morning as she sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of untouched tea. "They're hiring. You love flowers. Maybe it could help." She looked at me slowly. "I don't know," she said. "What if I'm terrible at it?" "You won't be," I said firmly. "And if it doesn't work out, then you try something else. But you have to start somewhere." She was quiet for a long time, then finally gave a small nod. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." A week later, she started working at the flower shop. At first, it was just something to do, a way to pass the time and keep her hands busy. But slowly, something changed. I saw it in the way she talked about the arrangements she made, the way her face lit up when she described certain blooms or color combinations. She loved the textures, the smells, the soft beauty of petals and stems. It was gentle, quiet work, but it gave her a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. It became her therapy. Then one afternoon, everything shifted again. Daniel walked into the shop. He was tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He approached the counter and asked for a small, cheerful bouquet. "It's for my mom," he said, his voice calm. "She's in the hospital, but I think flowers help brighten her day." Sophie nodded, already moving to gather some stems. She didn't say much, just listened and nodded, her hands moving steadily as she created a beautiful little bouquet. He thanked her and left. Later that evening, she told me about him. "He seemed nice," she said simply. I didn't press, but I could see something had shifted. It wasn't anything big, just a tiny ripple in the quiet water she'd been living in. Daniel started coming in regularly. Every few days, he'd stop by the shop, always ordering something simple for his mom. He'd talk while she worked, asking questions about flowers, what her favorites were, which ones were in season. He asked how her day was going. He smiled. Often. It wasn't forced or flirty, but it was just kind. And Sophie noticed. One evening, as we sat on her couch with cups of tea in hand, she looked at me curiously. "You think he's just being polite?" she asked. I grinned. "I think he likes you." She didn't answer right away, but her smile, small and uncertain, said more than words. "And I think you like him too." Sophie blushed when I said, "it." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't deny it either. Her eyes drifted away and the corners of her mouth turned up ever so slightly. That was enough for me to know. A few days later, something happened that changed everything. It was a quiet evening, just as the sun was setting. Sophie had finished her shift at the flower shop and was walking out to her car. She paused when she saw something sitting on the hood, a bouquet of soft pink and yellow flowers, tied with a delicate ribbon. Tucked between the blooms was a small note. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up. She opened the folded paper and read the words slowly. "For the person who brightens my day every time I walk into the shop, Daniel." Sophie stood there for a long time, just holding the flowers. She didn't move, didn't speak, but then, slowly, something changed. A smile, soft, real, and full of something new, spread across her face. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months, maybe even years. And for the first time, she didn't look like someone who was trying to be okay. She looked happy. And it wasn't because someone felt guilty. It wasn't because someone was putting on a show for others. This time, it was real. And even more importantly, she was finally starting to believe that she deserved it. From then on, Daniel became a regular at the flower shop. Not just to buy flowers, but to see Sophie. He'd linger by the counter after placing his order, talking to her about all kinds of things. His favorite books, his childhood memories, the funny things his mom used to say. He asked about her too, always listening closely, always smiling. His kindness was quiet and natural. He didn't make a big show of it. He didn't try too hard. And Sophie noticed. "Every time he walks in, he's smiling," she told me one afternoon while we were walking through the park. "Not in that fake way Ethan used to do where it looked good in front of people. It's different, but I don't know. Maybe he's just being nice." I smiled and shook my head. "He's being nice because he likes you, Sophie. Don't overthink it." Still, she was cautious. And how could I blame her? She'd been hurt deeply. She had trusted once, and it ended in silence, in coldness, in someone walking out the door, without even looking back. So she didn't let herself fall too fast. She didn't let her heart open too quickly. But Daniel didn't push. He didn't rush her. Instead, he showed up with small, thoughtful gestures. On a rainy morning, he brought her a warm coffee just the way she liked it. When the shop was busy and Sophie was stressed, he came in with a silly joke that made her laugh out loud. One afternoon, he brought in a tiny potted plant and said, "I thought this would look nice by the shop's window." Sophie held the plant in her hands, surprised. "You didn't have to do this," she said, smiling at him. "I know," Daniel said, grinning. "But I wanted to." It was sweet and simple, and somehow, it meant more than any grand gesture ever could. But it wasn't until the evening she found the bouquet and the note on her car that something really shifted inside her. Standing alone in the parking lot reading his words, Sophie felt something unfamiliar, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Warmth. Not the warmth that comes from flattery or guilt, but the kind that comes from being truly seen, from being noticed in a way that was real and kind and free of expectations. The next time Daniel came into the shop, she didn't hesitate. She smiled at him, openly, freely. "I got your note," she said softly. Daniel's eyes lit up, and he smiled even wider. "I meant every word," he said. After that, they started seeing each other outside of the flower shop. Nothing dramatic, just little things. Coffee at the local cafe, walks in the park on cool evenings, sitting on benches and watching people pass by. It was simple, but it was enough. Slowly, gently, Sophie let her guard down, piece by piece. I watched the change in her, and it made my heart feel full. She laughed more. She dressed in brighter colors. Her voice had a new energy to it, like the weight she had carried for so long was finally lifting. She was healing. She was learning what it felt like to be cared for without conditions, to be loved without having to earn it, to be seen fully and clearly and still chosen. For the first time in a long time, I knew my sister wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. And not because someone felt guilty, not because someone was pretending to love her for the sake of appearances, but because this time, love had come quietly, gently, and truthfully. And it was hers, and it was real.